Today I'm going to be discussing a controversial topic, one regarding why Tommy DeSimone was killed, as well as the numerous theories of who actually killed him. Let's begin by taking a look at who Tommy DeSimone really was. He was born in 1946 and hailed from South Ozone Park, Queens. His life of crime started at a young age, and by the time he was 15, he had already become acquainted with Jimmy Burke, who was 15 years his senior. Jimmy's headquarters, Robert's Lounge, was also based in South Ozone Park. At the time, Jimmy Burke was 30 years old and a well-established gangster. One associated to the Vario crew, a Brooklyn faction of the Lucchese family, headed by its captain, Paul Vario. To put Jimmy's street status into proper perspective, he accomplished something not only as an associate, but a non-Italian, as Jimmy was Irish, and that was being treated, and more importantly, respected, on the same level as any wise guy. Over and above that, he operated as a captain with the crew of guys beneath him, all capable guys, with Jimmy being the most capable. I can say this: anyone who knew Jimmy, any guys in the street or in prison, only spoke of him in the highest regard. So it was Jimmy Burke who put Tommy DeSimone on the map, so to speak. And he did so by bringing DeSimone around and introducing him to the members and associates of the mob. Jimmy, unlike a lot of guys who would just use younger guys, took young men like DeSimone and taught them how to make money. For instance, he taught DeSimone how to hijack trucks, especially ones loaded with cigarettes, which they sold by the carton to anyone who smoked, and were making a few $100s a day. One of DeSimone's early arrests took place in 1962 when he was 16 years old for stealing a car, in which he received probation. His first arrest regarding on-tax cigarettes was in 1966. He was found in a van with $4,000 worth of cigarettes. That case would be dismissed. He was also arrested that same year for stolen property and bookmaking, and those charges were dismissed as well. He had another arrest in 1966, this time in New Jersey, again for on-tax cigarettes, and for that case he only received a fine. In March of 1967, he was arrested along with Jimmy Burke in Long Island for possessing 1,700 boxes of on-tax cigarettes. He served a 15-day sentence for that case. Besides cigarettes, Jimmy Burke's crew used John F. Kennedy Airport as their personal ATM, mostly by hijacking trucks, but they would occasionally set up scores inside the airport as well. In April 1967, DeSimone and Henry Hill pulled off a score at Air France Cargo Terminal and came away with over $400,000. Henry Hill was another one of the young guys around Jimmy Burke and someone who became friends and robbing partners with DeSimone. The following year, in April 1968, DeSimone was arrested for possession of a weapon, and those charges were also dropped. In 1969, DeSimone was caught again with over 1,400 packs of cigarettes, this time in Tarrytown, New York, and was released on $500 bail. One of the characteristics commonly known regarding Tommy DeSimone was his tendencies to violence. According to Henry Hill, in 1968, DeSimone allegedly shot and killed a random stranger just for the fun of it and to bolster his reputation, which, by the way, most old-timers would view you as an asshole for doing something like that. But keep in mind, Hill's claim is unverifiable, as is a great deal of other claims he's made. Also in 1969, DeSimone and others, including Vinny Asaro, a future Bonanno captain, was arrested for stolen property worth more than $1 million in TVs, furniture, clothing, etc. Charges that were eventually dismissed. And I'm sure viewers are taking notice to all DeSimone's dismissals. But this was common back in the 60s and early 70s. Again, according to Henry Hill, DeSimone began not only dealing drugs, but frequently using cocaine, which intensified his violent outbursts, as well as made them unpredictable. William Billy Bats Benvina was said to have been straightened out with the Gambino family in the early 1960s, which would be incorrect, as the books, the induction of new members, were closed from 1957 until 1976. Benvina was born in February 1933, so it's possible his induction took place prior to 1957, or more likely, it's conceivable he may have just been an associate. Nevertheless, he was around the Carmine Fatico crew, which included John Gotti, who Benvina was friends with. In May 1960, Benvina was indicted on a narcotics case, and one of his co-defendants was Carmine Galante. On June 26, 1962, he was convicted and sentenced to 15 years on July 10, 1962. He was released sometime in June 1970, and according to Henry Hill, as depicted in a scene in the movie Goodfellas, during a coming home party in a bar in Queens, Benvina insulted DeSimone with the infamous line, "Now go home and go get your fucking shine box." Hill claims it was not on that night, but 2 weeks later, that DeSimone ran into Benvina, who was drinking at a bar owned by Hill, and pistol whipped him while Jimmy Burke was holding him in a headlock. They believed Benvina was dead and loaded him into a trunk of a car and began driving him to upstate New York. During the trip, Benvina began banging around in the trunk, so they pulled over and finished him off with a shovel and a tire iron. Subsequently, they buried him on property upstate that belonged to a dog breeder. However, months later, the property was being sold and the body had to be dug up and relocated. Killing Benvina was a major violation if he was a Gambino member, but even just as an associate, it's still considered an unsanctioned hit. Following Benvina's murder, DeSimone is said to have been involved in several other murders. One in particular took place on December 18, 1974. Ronald Foxy Giroux was a Gambino associate who was very close to John Gotti and his crew, especially that they grew up together in East New York, Brooklyn. In fact, my parents, who both came from East New York, knew Foxy well. Supposedly, one story goes, DeSimone began seeing Foxy's sister, which was said to have enraged him. But it wasn't until after DeSimone allegedly assaulted the woman that Foxy threatened to kill him. So on December 18, 1974, DeSimone went to Foxy's apartment and after a tussle, shot him 3 times. Echoing what I previously stated, this was another unsanctioned hit, which naturally would have angered the Gambino family. I've heard another version in which Foxy and DeSimone were involved with the same woman. I'm not going to say who that woman was because I avoid drama, not promote it. In April 1975, DeSimone was convicted for one of the hijackings that he was a part of and sentenced to 10 years, of which he served 3 before he was sent to a halfway house in 1978. A major event would take place for the crew at Robert's Lounge. On December 11, 1978, at 4 a.m., inside John F. Kennedy Airport, a crew of guys robbed $5 million and over $800,000 in jewelry from the Lufthansa cargo terminal. This heist was masterminded by Jimmy Burke and carried out by members of his crew, which most likely included DeSimone. Law enforcement investigating the robbery regarded him as a suspect. An important fact to remember, up to this point, putting aside that DeSimone was a Lucchese associate, he was also extremely close to Jimmy Burke, and I believe it's one of the things that saved him. Following the heist, about a half dozen people tied to it were killed, beginning with Parnell Stephen Edwards, nicknamed Stacks, who was assigned the task of taking the stolen van that was used in the robbery to a New Jersey junkyard to be crushed. Instead, he went to visit a woman and parked it in a no parking zone, causing the van to be ticketed and identified as the one tied to the robbery. On December 18, 1978, DeSimone and fellow crew member Angelo Seppi shot Stacks 6 times in his apartment in Queens. Fast forward to January 14, 1979, a date that's often reported as being DeSimone's date of death. However, on that day, his wife reported him missing and stated that she hadn't seen him in weeks. Remember, the Burke crew was busy preparing for the heist and carrying it out and then conducting house cleaning. DeSimone's wife was used to him not coming home for days on end. The exact date he was killed is unknown. Realistically, it's sometime after December 18, 1978, and up until the second week of January 1979. The following are some of the theories associated to Tommy DeSimone's death. Paulie Vario had DeSimone killed after learning he tried to have his way with Karen Hill, who, by the way, Vario was screwing. Nice guy. Another theory is John Gotti personally killed DeSimone to avenge the deaths of Billy Batts and Foxy. Another is that Gotti had Gambino member Tommy Agro kill DeSimone. According to former Lucchese acting boss Al Diaco, he spotted DeSimone one night all decked out at Gefkin's, which was a Brooklyn bar the Vario crew stood in. Supposedly, DeSimone was under the impression that he was getting straightened out and left with Lucchese member Bruno Fasciolo and Vario's son, and Fasciolo killed him in a house in Brooklyn. Yet another theory has Jimmy Burke killing DeSimone, adding him to the house cleaning list. In addition, because he knew the Gambinos were investigating the murder of Billy Batts, this theory, in my opinion, is the weakest of them all. And the last theory has DeSimone allegedly putting his hands on Neil Della Croce's son, Buddy, who supposedly was seeing DeSimone's girl while he was in prison, which in turn the Gambinos put pressure on the Lucchese family to kill DeSimone. One thing's for certain, the Gambino family in no way was a fan of Tommy DeSimone. On a quick side note, a young woman, Teresa Ferrara, who was allegedly dating DeSimone, received a call in February 1979 at her salon. The caller told her that she could make a quick $10,000, but she had to meet in the Long Island diner, as she explained to her niece while rushing out. After that meeting, Ferrara disappeared, and on May 18, 1979, her dismembered torso was found floating in an inlet near Toms River, New Jersey. Allegedly, in 1977, she was arrested for selling cocaine and cut a deal with law enforcement where she gave information on the crew at Robert's Lounge. Let me quickly mention the super thanks icon found beneath the video in the three-dot drop-down for anyone who'd like to show appreciation for videos like this. And thank you. In the final analysis, clearly, Tommy DeSimone, although just an associate, will forever be ingrained into the fabric of mob history. I put him and his disappearance in the same category as Jimmy Hoffa. And the only two facts any of us know for sure were they were both killed and disappeared. And in similar fashion, there are all kinds of conspiracy theories as to who was responsible and even where their remains ended up. But the final fact, as well as the hard truth, defines the true core of the mob. Both Jimmy Hoffa and Tommy DeSimone were lured to their death by people they absolutely trusted.